I spent 12 days teaching them how to back. I only used 2 to 3 days for my students. This guy had 4 times more training time than the average student. I was getting yelled at by the upper people in this company. They were like, hey, why are you still here? Y'all should have already been had a CDL and left. I said, well, I really want to make sure he knows what he's doing. He's my uncle. They're like, dude, here's your deadline. He's got a test. Marshall almost quit then because he was all like, they can't rush me, bro. They can't rush. I said, well, you've had 4 times more time, 4 times the amount of time that the average student has had. Like, it's time to test, you know? So, and for the record, he's the first person in the history of the company to fail the road portion of the test. First one.
Wow.
Everybody, listen. When it comes to backing, a lot of the students choke their first time. They get nervous. They turn the wheel the wrong way. They question themselves, and they fail. That's normal. He failed his backing first day. I was bummed. Even though I gave him 4 times the amount of time, 12 days, I was like, whatever. It's cool. It's fine. Mind you, every time he fails, they take a little bit of my bonus off. It's like $150 each time. So the next day, he passes back, and I'm like, yes. You know, he got his pre-trip done. He passes back, and I'm like, yes, he's got it. Road trip, I take my students out for a week, bring them back as far as road training goes. They pass. Just drive the truck safely. I had him out for 3 weeks, pushing 4, okay? So I'm like, he's got the road test. This a wrap. They come back. Not only did he fail, the examiner, my dispatcher, the dispatcher's boss, the guy that's ahead of the training, they all come in to the room with me and Marshall. And they're like, we got some grave news for you, buddy. I'm thinking like, what did he crash the truck on the test? Like, what happened? What's so grave? It's a road test. They're like, your uncle, your student here, we're going to refer to him as your student because we got to remain professional. As the first one in the history of this program of 7,000 people that have come through this program, he failed the road test. I'm like, how? What did he do? Like, the way you would fail a road test is like if you didn't put your seatbelt on or something. You know what I mean? Like, that would fail you. So I'm thinking maybe he just forgot to put it. They're like, well, he got in the truck. We had to explain to him, which they're not supposed to. They're supposed to fail you on the spot. The examiner had to tell him to put his seatbelt on to remind him. Then he told the examiner, well, I don't find it comfortable. I'm just going to leave it off. The examiner was like, no, you're going to put it on and we're not proceeding with the road test. Okay? They let him slide with that shit. Leaving the parking lot, he drove one hand, not 2 hands, 10 and 2 like he's been doing, like I've been taught him. But I used to smack him if he was to just drive with one hand. He drove with one hand. Half the time he drove with no hands. His hands were not on the wheel. The whole road trip, he didn't use the signals one time. He never signaled.
Oh, my God.
Almost ran the trailer into the ditch. Almost took out a bicyclist. Okay? And even after doing all that shit, he still would have passed the last turn coming into the parking lot back. And if he would have just turned hand over hand on the wheel and turned in, he would have passed. His last point, and this is quote from the examiner, when he decided to lean back like this, like he's in a 70s fucking Cadillac, and 2-finger steer this big motherfucker into the parking lot like he's a pimp. I'm looking at Marshall. This is another $150 gone from me, by the way. I'm looking at Marshall, and I'm looking at the examiner. I'm like, I'm pleading with these people, these upper corporate office people. I'm like, guys, I have never let my students have never done this. I never would let him get away with this. I want nothing but the best training for him. He's my uncle. I've got my life in his hands in this truck. Right. You know what the examiner said? He said, well, looks like he just mysteriously picked up all these bad habits out of nowhere then today, huh? Looking at the examiner, I'm like, you calling me a liar? He's like, I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying, you know, he just must have picked up all these habits out of nowhere. Basically, I wanted to bust the fucking chair over his head right there and just be done with it. Like, the fucking guy.